Chapter 25, Las Vegas 2. Draconic Deus Earth. United States, Las Vegas. Bellagio, in the private room. Aiden was comfortably seated on a sofa next to Kurumi, Yuzuru, Kagaya, Origami, and Toka. In front of them, on another sofa, was Riser Phoenix, a blonde man dressed in an elegant host suit. Next to him was his younger sister, Ravel Phoenix, while behind Riser stood his nobility in perfect silence, standing behind their king. Riser had brought Aiden to this private room after witnessing a controlled display of his magical power, enough to rival that of a definitive class. Although Aiden only revealed a small part of his strength, it was enough to capture Riser's attention without alarming him. After all, even though Riser was a top-class demon with the advantage of immortality, he did not underestimate someone with such potential. However, it wasn't only Aiden's power that piqued Riser's interest, but the technology Aiden had mentioned. The proposal had implications in both the human world and the supernatural, and its usefulness seemed infinite. Medical applications, assistance for disabled people, military uses, and more. The silence in the room was palpable. The gazes of both groups crossed in tense calm. Finally, Aiden decided to break the ice. First of all, I apologize for interrupting your engagement celebration, Aiden said in a firm but polite voice. And second, congratulations on your marriage to the heir of Gremory. Aiden was determined to be courteous. After all, he wanted to build a lasting business relationship with his potential partner. Riser smiled at the gesture and responded with a hint of contained disdain. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there are still 10 days until the wedding. I can celebrate at another time. Now, Human-san, the offer you mentioned seemed quite interesting. Although his tone conveyed arrogance, Riser was not a fool. Despite being a pure-blood demon, he knew how to recognize an opportunity when he saw one and treated Aiden with respect. This human, though unusual, could be a valuable ally for the Phoenix House. As the polite words went back and forth with calculated smiles, Riser's nobility and his sister Ravel didn't understand any of the exchange. On the other hand, the girls accompanying Aiden were well aware, thanks to the telepathic communication they had witnessed. Intrigued, Ravel decided to interrupt. Oni-sama, can you introduce me to this gentleman? And, if it's not too much trouble, could I know what you're talking about? As Riser's younger sister and a pure-blood demon, Ravel had no qualms about intervening. Moreover, she couldn't help but feel intrigued by her arrogant brother's unusual courtesy toward these humans, whom he would normally disdain. Her eyes evaluated the group in front of her. She couldn't help but notice that they were incredibly attractive. Aiden looked like a prince from a fairy tale, while the girls accompanying him had a beauty that could only be described as divine. Riser secretly shared the same impression, though he didn't admit it, convinced that Rias Gremory was still the most beautiful woman. Aiden, on the other hand, would have considered that opinion a sign of blindness. Oh, Ravel, this human gentleman is named Aiden Avalon, Riser responded, pointing to Aiden. He communicated with me through telepathic magic, and we briefly discussed a deal. I brought him here to talk further, as the subject is very interesting. Aiden slightly inclined his head toward Ravel as a gesture of courtesy, while she responded with the elegance of a noble lady. I see. My name is Ravel Phoenix, the fourth daughter of the Phoenix House, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld, she said with a clear and determined voice. A pleasure to meet you, Lady Ravel, Aiden replied, observing how the young woman's blonde hair stood out against her long skirt and carefully styled pigtails. After the formal introductions, Aiden proceeded to introduce Kurumi, Origami, Yuzuru, Kagaya, and Toka. For his part, Riser did the same with his nobility, managing to ease the atmosphere slightly as the two groups began to get to know each other a little more. Now, can Aiden-sama tell me what kind of technology would make my older brother so interested? Ravel asked, taking control of the negotiations. Riser opened his mouth to intervene, but a single, withering glance from his sister forced him to close it, helpless. This girl has her older brother completely under control, Kurumi said telepathically in Aiden's mind. However, in reality, her expression remained impeccably polite. Lady Ravel, the technology one plan to develop is called nerve gear. Aiden responded calmly. Nerve gear, Ravel repeated, curious. It's a fully immersive virtual reality technology that allows people to enter a virtual world entirely designed by themselves, Aiden explained. Ravel and Reiser's nobility were left speechless, processing the magnitude of what they had just heard. Fully immersive virtual reality? This is undoubtedly a technology that many people would desire to own, Ravel commented, reflecting. It could have applications in both the human world and the supernatural. But, Aiden-sama, could you explain more? If the technology is as revolutionary as it seems, I wouldn't have any problem contacting my father to discuss a potential business alliance. In this world, virtual reality did not yet exist, not even with geniuses like Ajuka Beelzebub. Perhaps the Mao wasn't interested in that field, or simply hadn't managed to develop it. However, Ravel could immediately imagine the impact of something like this, from medical advances to military training or simple improvements in quality of life. This VR headset allows one to immerse themselves in a virtual world through full immersion, Aiden said, confident in every word. It connects directly to the nervous system through brainwaves, canceling out the physical control of the body and transmitting the user's actions to the virtual environment. He paused before adding, moreover, the materials required aren't particularly expensive. The complicated part is the system and the technology itself, but with the labor force of the Phoenix House, that shouldn't be a problem, right? Ravel nodded slowly as she processed each detail. If this technology can create unique virtual worlds, it would be incredible. Doctors could practice surgeries without risk, military forces could train in simulated environments, and disabled people could experience a full life in that world. Even mundanes would buy it just to play video games, she said, listing the benefits enthusiastically. That's only in the human world, Aiden added with a slight smile. But this technology is not ordinary. It was created by a being from the supernatural world, and magic is already involved. For example, what would you think if time in the virtual world were accelerated? I mean, for every hour in reality, 12 would pass in the virtual world. This would allow users to enjoy much more time than they would normally have. Sounds interesting, right? The proposal left the Phoenix family speechless. For Aiden, it was no exaggeration. With his knowledge of Zafkiel and his experience in manipulating time, he had already improved the original nerve gear. What? Reiser and Ravel exclaimed in unison. You're not lying? Are you human, Sans? Reiser asked directly, staring intently at Aiden. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound rude, Aiden-sama, but that's so surprising that I can't just believe it, Ravel said, still shocked but maintaining her. Aiden smiled calmly. You can question my words later. For now, allow me to mention some benefits in the supernatural world. Reiser and Ravel exchanged a glance before nodding with interest. Please continue, Ravel requested. As time is slower, they would have much more time to develop your technique, whether it's through strategic knowledge and experience gained from simulations, or by developing your own strength. They could practice martial arts or magic without fatigue. Even high-ranking demons could simulate their ranking games matches, increasing their overall experience. Aiden explained, while Ravel and Reiser nodded with interest. It could be used for everything, basically, Ravel added, but before she could continue, Aiden interrupted her with something unexpected. Although I'm not sure, since I haven't tested it, maybe my nerve gear could also help demons affected by the demon sleep disease. Everyone fell silent. Aiden knew that this disease affected demons exclusively, leaving them in a deep coma from which they could not wake. Perhaps with his nerve gear, these individuals could live in a virtual world. Although deep down, he also believed that with Gabriel's power, he could forcefully wake them up. If that works, it will solve a problem that affects our entire race. Ravel exclaimed, excited. Well, don't be so sure yet. I just said it might work, Aiden clarified calmly. But if it really works, Aiden-sama will solve a huge problem that has tormented demons for a long time. Ravel insisted. Aiden simply smiled at her enthusiasm. After that, they continued discussing minor details, as the important points would be addressed later with Lord Phoenix. Aiden had achieved what he wanted, a powerful ally, a steady source of income, and a virtual space to train his future allies. When the conversation ended, Riser got up from the sofa and, with his usual air, said, "Human-san, I might send you an invitation to this Riser's wedding. It will be an important day. You could also meet with my father to finalize the deal." Aiden let out a slight laugh but agreed to attend, interested in finalizing the agreement. "It was a pleasure talking to you, Aiden-sama," Ravel said courteously, bowing like a noble lady. As they were about to leave, Aiden stopped Ravel by taking her hand. She stopped, slightly confused, while a faint blush covered her cheeks. "Wait, give this to Lord Phoenix. Here are the basic principles for him to trust me. Although, without the other part, it's impossible to create the technology," Aiden explained, handing her a document. "Sure," Ravel replied, retreating toward her older brother. A magic circle with the Phoenix House symbol appeared beneath Riser and his entourage's feet, as Ravel cast a final glance at Aiden. "This Riser bids farewell to the human world," proclaimed Riser. Flash! The magic circle enveloped them, disappearing from the room. The way he refers to himself in the third person is quite embarrassing to watch, Kagaya commented frankly after his departure. "Agreed. I think the same, though at least they were polite. I read that pure-blood demons tend to think of themselves as the center of the universe, especially with humans," Yuzuru added, addressing her twin. "With the benefits of Danasama's technology, it's logical that they treat him courteously." "The benefits are clear," Kurumi remarked with a smile. "Well, I've already achieved what I wanted, a powerful ally and new human identities. With all the money we've made in this casino, we could buy a house right now," Aiden said, tugging on Toka's cheek, who had fallen asleep from boredom during the serious conversation. "Good morning," Toka murmured, rubbing her eyes and still dazed. X5. "Anyway, since our goal here is resolved, let's go meet the others. Tomorrow Ravel Phoenix will send our background to the motel, and then we could buy property," Aiden concluded. The girls nodded, but just as they were about to teleport, Origami spoke, crossing her arms. "Aiden, aren't you forgetting something?" Aiden thought for a moment, then suddenly remembered. "We'll go back first, Danasama. Spend the night with Origami, since we bet on it," Kurumi said, amused. Flash! Without opposition, the other girls teleported away with magic. "Origami, where do you want to go?" "Chill." Before he could finish his sentence, Origami pushed him onto the sofa and kissed him without warning. "Chill. Aiden, why don't we do it here? Wouldn't it be exciting?" Origami said with her typical Kaderi face, but accompanied by a lewd smile that contradicted her usual coldness. End of the chapter. A/N. Boring chapter? Anyway, I've already laid the foundations for Aiden to attend the wedding and have his first meeting with Issei. Although he'll probably not do much and will just limit himself to watching. That said, when he travels to the underworld, he'll do something much more important than attending that wedding. Chapter 26. Common Foul Devil. Draconic Deus. Earth, Japan. Kyoto. At X Motel. One day after the night, Aiden traveled to Las Vegas and sealed an alliance with the Phoenix. He stood at the entrance of his motel room, watching as the Phoenix family's servant disappeared into a magic teleportation circle. This was the same servant Ravel had promised to send him the day before, bringing with him the fake backgrounds Aiden had requested. Now, both he and the girls had complete records of their supposed human lives in this world. With the backing of such an influential noble house as the Phoenix, creating something like this had been far too easy. Has he already left? Natsumi asked as she saw him enter the room again. She was sitting on the couch, watching TV with a nonchalant air. "Yes," Aiden replied, nodding as he sat beside her. Without wasting any time, Natsumi got up and settled onto his lap, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "So," she said, wanting to know what had happened. "Ravel-san sent a servant with the backgrounds I requested yesterday. Here are the names they also chose. Since we're not married, it would be strange for all of us to share the same last name," Aiden explained as he handed her the documents. "Oh." As expected from a noble house, they work fast. Here's everything: names, histories, No human or supernatural being would notice anything strange unless you tell them yourself, Natsumi commented as she read through the documents carefully. Natsumi Kuno. That was the name she had chosen for herself. It had come to her immediately, and although she hadn't thought much about it, it sounded good and she didn't dislike it. Were you also invited to the wedding ceremony of that guy who speaks in the third person? Natsumi suddenly asked, glancing up at Aiden. He had already told the girls everything that had happened the previous night at the Bellagio in the United States, and both Kagaya and Yuzuru hadn't missed the opportunity to mock Riser's peculiar way of speaking. Of course, Makuro was quick to take offense, as she also spoke in the third person. However, the other simply responded that, in Makuro, it was cute, but in an adult man, it was ridiculous. Yes, Ravel-san mentioned that I'd be invited. According to her, as a future important business partner, I should be present. But she said she'll send me the invitation and the date on another occasion, since they have pending matters to resolve on their side. Aiden finally responded, looking at Natsumi. She nodded with a smile, clearly entertained by the situation. Well, I suppose we don't need to worry too much anymore, and can take things easy living in this world. It's not like there's going to be a war soon, although that terrorist group is a bit concerning. It's not our problem for now, Natsumi commented as she settled more comfortably on Aiden's lap, lazily watching the TV. She was right. Aiden had already achieved one of his main goals, securing a powerful ally. With the sale of the nerve gear, once finalized, he wouldn't need to worry about money or the funds necessary for the organization he planned to form over time. As for the matter of war, the original Mao had died in the Great War long ago, along with many of the 72 pillars of the underworld, leading to the extinction of several clans. In the sky, God had literally died. Without him, they could no longer produce as many pure angels as they did before the war, and they had no choice but to reproduce with humans, though many angels fell from heaven by doing so. On the other hand, Grigori, under Azazel's command, had lost too many comrades in the war and now preferred to avoid conflicts, dedicating themselves to researching God's sacred gears. With the three biblical factions worn down, another war seemed unlikely unless something truly serious happened. This was what Aiden had managed to investigate thanks to Raziel. Of course, those factions were still enemies, and their members still treated each other with hostility when they crossed paths. Not to mention the problems from other myths. Whether Indra wanted to fight Shiva or Ragnarok erupted in Asgard, none of that really mattered to Aiden. None of those conflicts would affect him at all. Aiden, weren't you going to investigate the evil pieces today? Natsumi asked, breaking his calm. Aiden nodded. I wanted to steal a set from some demon, though maybe I could ask the Phoenix for one when we make the business deal. Wouldn't it be easier to just find a demon with a complete set of evil pieces, knock them out for a moment, use analyze, and then leave? Natsumi suggested. Aiden looked at her silently, surprised by how straightforward and simple the idea sounded. In the end, he had to admit it was quite effective. Good idea, he replied, stroking her head and green hair tenderly. You could also look for some sacred gear user, right? She added, still thoughtful. I'll do that later, Aiden muttered, succumbing to the same laziness that seemed to fill the atmosphere. Eventually, he decided to relax alongside Natsumi, and without realizing it, he ended up falling asleep. In a parallel Earth. One day later, another failure. Huh? Aiden murmured as he distractedly read the information about that world through Raziel. What he had discovered was that it was a parallel Earth, but unlike Draconic Deus, no supernatural beings existed here. Well, at least this world could serve as a backup if things get complicated in the future. Maybe I could even find talented people bored of a normal life and bring them to the other world. With the spirit pieces and artificial sacred gears I'll create in the future, it wouldn't be impossible to make them more powerful. The reason Aiden was exploring worlds, using the 2 to 3 daily attempts allowed by Kaleidoscope, was to find the origin world of fauna. However, so far he had been unsuccessful. Since leaving Alicia, he had already made nearly 300 attempts and still hadn't found the right world. It's like playing gacha, he thought resignedly. Even though he had the development ability, luck, it didn't seem to be enough. As expected of an infinite multiverse, it won't be that easy. Still, with some luck, I might stumble upon an interesting world while searching for fauna. His voice faded into an almost inaudible murmur. Clank! The portal opened, and after saving the coordinates of that parallel Earth, Aiden left. Draconic Deus. Earth, Japan. Kyoto. At X Motel. 2 days later. Origami stared at Toka with a blank expression. What's wrong with you, Origami? I didn't do anything for you to look at me like that, as if I were some kind of bug, protested Toka, sitting on the couch while watching TV. Origami wondered if this girl truly thought she was an idiot. Am I snacks? Origami asked calmly, fixing her gaze on Toka's face, which had several crumbs of what she suspected were her snacks. I don't know. Why are you asking me? Ask the others, or Aiden. It could have been them, right? Toka replied nervously, unconsciously licking her lip. This idiot. Origami thought. Toka, do you really think everyone is as much of an idiot as you? Origami sighed. In the end, she decided not to bother taking her snacks back. What did you say? Warigmi? Toka was about to snap back when another voice interrupted. Toka-chin, at least wipe your mouth when you're done eating. Seriously, Origami isn't wrong to call you an idiot. Nia, who was drawing manga, spoke without even looking up. Yoshino, who was also there, nodded in agreement with Nia. She slowly got up, and her pajamas transformed into a long white dress with a hat. Heading out again, Yoshino-chan? Nia asked as she continued working on her manga. Yoshino's puppet answered first. Yes, Yoshino, and I enjoy walking around here. We like observing different types of yukai. Some have entertaining habits. Besides, Kuna-chan wanted to see us yesterday, but we couldn't go. Now that we're free, why not? Yes. I also want to play with Kuna-san, Yoshino added softly. In previous days, Yoshino had met Kunu and her guards while strolling. They quickly became friends, and Yasaka, the leader of Kyoto's yukai, also expressed gratitude to Yoshino. Though at first, Yasaka was somewhat perplexed by the changes in Yoshino's hair and personality. From lively to shy, she soon adapted. The leader of the yukai, Yasaka, hasn't she asked you to join her faction? Or maybe she's been subtly questioning you to learn more about you? Kotori, who was also present, asked. Yoshino shook her head, but her puppet intervened. Not yet. Yasaka-san is probably investigating our backgrounds since we appeared in her territory out of nowhere. Well, at least she's kind enough not to complain about us being here, Origami commented, taking one of Toka's snacks. Origami, please don't eat my snacks. Toka whimpered. Origami silently stared at her, opened the snack, and ate it slowly. Then she licked her fingers and gave Toka a triumphant smile. You're so cruel. Origami, Toka muttered, tears welling up. Nia looked at Yoshino and gave her a few instructions before she left. Be careful out there, and don't come back too late, okay? Kotori accompanied Yoshino to the door and watched as her body became invisible before leaving. After all, this was a motel, and Aiden had never mentioned having companions. We won't be late, Yoshino communicated mentally before disappearing. Kotori returned to the living room, where she found Toka and Origami fighting. She decided to ignore them. That was already normal. Nia, where's Aiden now? Kotori asked. He said he wanted to find a demon to investigate the evil pieces. Nia replied without taking her eyes off her manga. Kotori leaned in to see what she was drawing. When she saw the storyline, she couldn't help but purse her lips, as it was surprisingly similar to the structure of this world, though with some obvious differences. Ah, so boring, Kotori murmured, settling onto the couch to watch TV. Draconic Deus. Earth. Japan, Tokyo. Seriously, this demon is such a despicable being. Aiden, sitting on the roof of a house, murmured while observing from a distance a demon forcing a girl to join his nobility. In other words, he was compelling her to become his slave or servant, call it what you will. So this is why the entire supernatural world thinks Ajuka Beelzebub's evil pieces are the worst invention ever created, huh? The evil pieces were originally created to replenish the lack of demons after the Great War, where many lives were lost. However, things had spiraled out of control. This case was a perfect example. Aiden had used Raziel to locate a demon in the human world. His plan was to politely ask to investigate his evil pieces. Of course, polite if you ignored the fact that he'd first knock the demon out, then analyze the evil pieces, erase his memories, and leave as if nothing had happened. But seeing this situation, which was clearly common among these twisted demons, Aiden didn't feel guilty at all. I wonder if this is why so many reincarnated demons rebel against their masters and end up as rogue demons. Without another thought, Aiden teleported near the demon. His eyes landed on the girl, who looked terrified. No wonder. The demon had already revealed his true nature, and she, a normal 16-year-old girl, was trapped in this nightmare. How horrifying must this be for a regular person? Hey, demon, you're disgusting, you know? Forcing a lady at this time of day, revolting. Aiden's voice echoed from behind the demon, who froze for a moment before turning around. Who are you? Why don't you mind your own business? Leave before I kill you, inferior human, barked the demon upon seeing Aiden. Why does everyone call me human? I guess I've never denied it. Oh well, whatever. Tell me something, demon. Is your ugly face so useless that you need to resort to such miserable tactics to get someone to join your nobility? Pathetic doesn't even begin to describe it. Aiden took a step closer, his hands in his pockets and a disdainful smile on his lips. How dare you, you cursed insect! I am a high-class demon. Insulting me like this can only mean you have a death wish. Flap! A pair of black wings emerged from the demon's back as an intense killing intent filled the air. The girl, unable to withstand the panic, fainted behind Aiden. Die? By your pathetic hands. Flash! Suddenly, hundreds of golden portals opened behind Aiden. From them emerged countless weapons, all aimed at the demon, who stood frozen in shock at the sight. Well? Oh, great high-class demon. How exactly were you planning to kill me? Aiden's voice remained indifferent, his eyes gleaming with a cold light. A/N. Yoshino and Yashinon are building relationships with the Yukai, considering potential alliances for the future. Meanwhile, Aiden is planning to create his own spirit pieces system before venturing out to recruit allies in other worlds. The first anime he plans to explore is Akame ga Kill. Why? Well, there's no deep reason, I just like the anime. Also, the Taigu resemble the sacred gears, and the organic Taigu are quite similar to independent sacred gears, like Canis Lycaon. Of course, there are still a few loose ends in this world to tie up before jumping to others. But don't worry, those stories won't drag on too much since the main plot remains focused on DxD. Chapter 27. Physical Bodies. Invitation. Draconic Dais. Earth. Tokyo. In an abandoned building. Bang. Damn it, you filthy human. Ah. It hurts, it hurts. Ah. Screams echoed inside an abandoned building. Well, of course it hurts, idiot. All these weapons are enchanted with light magic. Even if it's not holy power, you guys are still weak to it, right? Aiden calmly observed the devil, who was impaled against the wall. Several swords pierced his hands, legs, and thighs, carefully avoiding vital organs. Ah, I'm gonna die. Ah, spare me already. I'm losing blood. The devil trembled in fear. What was supposed to be a normal, victorious day had turned into a disaster. He had just ascended to high-class devil status after years of being a low-class devil. He had planned to kidnap a few girls and form a harem, abusing his newfound power as the king of his peerage. Now, here he was, impaled and humiliated. Does it really hurt that much? Even though God is dead, you still feel pain from the sacred. Oh, wait, that's not common knowledge. Please forget I said that. Ah, you're not listening. Aiden approached the devil, who was crying and gasping on the verge of death, and pulled a box from his clothes. As the screams continued, he opened it with indifference. So these are the evil pieces. Inside the box were chess pieces. 8 pawns, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, and 1 queen. As expected, the king piece was not there. That roll was registered directly in the underworld. How lucky! All of them at once, Aiden let out a soft chuckle, ready to use analyze, but stopped when he heard a noise behind him. Ah, bastard, give that back. Do you know how many years it took me to get that, huh? Damn it. You filthy insect. The devil, enraged, began to release his demonic power, a typical display of a shonen character. Aiden, however, didn't even blink. What should I do with you? Even though I'm not the best person, you're evil. If you stay alive, you might cause trouble for others. Well, let's end this. Who cares? A golden portal appeared behind Aiden as he spoke with complete calmness. Fire! Bang! A spear shot out and pierced the devil's head, ending him. At the same time, the other weapons impaling him vanished into dust, returning to the gate of Babylon. Aiden, now holding the evil pieces, walked away from the abandoned building. Before leaving, he made sure to erase the memory of the girl who had almost been victimized, freeing her from the terror she had endured. Draconic Deus. Earth. Kyoto. At the motel. One day later. Darling, you're working too much. You should rest more. We left Alicia to live in peace. Mika hugged Aiden while sitting on his lap, their noses almost touching. Darling shouldn't pay so much attention to these evil pieces all the time, she said, pouting. But they're interesting. Plus, they have so many benefits. He replied weakly. No excuses. You should take a break. Darling has been studying these pieces all day yesterday. Mika picked up the queen, evil piece, and looked at it curiously. I'm sorry. I'll take a break in a bit, but I wanted to finish this quickly. Aiden apologized with a helpless smile as he hugged her waist and buried his face in her chest. She looked at him silently, gently stroking his white hair as if he were a small child. The truth is, the reason I'm so excited about creating my spirit pieces, aside from wanting to form a cool organization, is because the spirit pieces could give you a complete physical body, Aiden spoke with emotion. He had already fully analyzed the evil pieces. The analyzed magic was quite practical and straightforward to understand. It simply scanned the entire element and sent the information directly to the brain. Despite having a level 10 body with 3,999 base stats in all his attributes, Aiden felt a headache while analyzing the pieces. If his body suffered, that gives you an idea of how complex understanding the functioning of these evil pieces was. But now he knew how each piece worked, how it was crafted, what characteristics each one had, and even how to create them. The only thing he still needed to analyze was the king piece, but that piece was no longer in any specific location where he could study it. Even so, there was an alternative: analyzing the king's monument found in the underworld. This system was where the kings of the peerage were registered along with their servants. In other words, it acted as a substitute for the king piece. As for the materials for the pieces, there was no issue. He could replace them with materials of similar qualities. For instance, the crystal from those crystal monsters he fought for 100 years. He could also use his null magic, called Condense, which allowed him to fuse materials and make them more durable. Aiden had abundant materials in his Gate of Babylon, so there were no obstacles. All that remained was to analyze the king's monument and create his own spirit piece system. And since Aiden wasn't creating these pieces to play the ratings games of the devils, the number of pieces he could have in his own noble house would be limited by what his soul could bear. But being a level 10 in fauna, that wasn't a problem. He could have more than 10 queens and even over 100 pawns, as long as his soul could withstand the weight. And considering he had a tree of life within his soul, his spiritual strength was no issue at all. Upon hearing the reason Aiden was so excited about the spirit pieces, Miku simply smiled sweetly and gently stroked his hair. A physical body. She might be hugging him now, feeling warmth, cold, pain, pleasure, tasting things, perceiving touch. All the sensations of a body were there. But in the end, it was still a body made purely of Ryuryoku, a physical manifestation created to accompany Aiden on his journey and keep him from feeling lonely. Darling, have you still not given up on that? We're already happy just being with you, she said softly, almost in a whisper. No, I'll make it so you can live with physical bodies. I know what you talk about in your dreams. I can also see that longing in you when you watch normal people with their families. Aiden knew the girls didn't desire to be human for philosophical reasons, like not wanting to be weapons or something similar. That didn't matter to them. What they longed for, with palpable desire, was what they saw in humans: love, connection, and descendants. Darling, can we really have a family? Miku asked, cupping his face between her breasts and looking directly into his eyes. She had seen thousands of humans during her decades of life in Alicia build families, remarry, and have more fruits of their love. She had always wished she could do the same, but unfortunately, she never had a body that allowed her to get pregnant. The same was true for the others. While their emotions varied, in the end, they all desired to have children. Yes, I promise. We'll be able to have as many as you want, even a whole soccer team, if that's what you want. Aiden replied with a smile, stroking her hair. Darling. Mika leaned her face closer to his and gave him a soft kiss. You're so cute, darling. Not handsome? Aiden asked with a playful smile. You're handsome too, but you're also cute. Anyone would mistake you for a teenager because you haven't changed at all. You're so cute. She hugged him, and they stayed there for a long time, cuddling, enjoying each other's warmth. Dimensional gap. 5 days later, Aiden floated somewhere in the undefined vastness of the dimensional gap. His body moved at high speed through this infinite space, a place with a kaleidoscopic sky that seemed like its own dimension, where colors blended into patterns that defied logic. I think this is a good spot. From his hands emerged several magic circles. Within these circles, more filled with letters and complex runes. Elven runes, fairy runes, spirit runes, Nordic runes, and more. With a single movement of his hand, these circles fused together as if he were drawing destiny itself. Flash! A massive magic circle appeared in the sky of the dimensional gap. In an instant, it expanded, transforming into a titanic barrier that covered at least 40 square kilometers of the vast void. Aiden approached one of the walls of the barrier and nodded, satisfied. Done. Now I have a territory. The air is already starting to form, and the pressure of being in the dimensional gap is slowly fading. In a few weeks, an ordinary human should be able to come here. Aiden had just created a territory within the dimensional gap. And why? The reason was simple. He needed a base for his supernatural organization, and the dimensional gap was the safest place he could think of to hide it. The dimensional gap was as vast as a universe, and the chances of someone stumbling upon his territory were minimal. Moreover, the barrier's spells concealed it even further. Not even Raziel could seek information within the dimensional gap. This space was infinite, existing across infinite parallel universes like a mirror. Since Raziel was only nearly omniscient on a planetary scale, it couldn't access this domain. 5 days had passed since Aiden spoke with Miku about the spirit pieces. The others also learned of the news, and their happiness was unanimous. That was all Aiden needed to know. Now, he had mastered the creation of the spirit pieces. Only one step remained: traveling to the underworld, entering Mao's territory, and analyzing the King's Monument to create his own King's Monument. He was waiting for an opportunity to go, and he knew that opportunity would come soon. He had spoken with Ravel, who had informed him that Riser's engagement to the Gremory heiress would be held in 2 days. The invitation would arrive tomorrow, or perhaps today, when she sent it with one of her servants. Aiden planned to use that time to send a time clone with Zafkiel to infiltrate the Mao's territory and analyze the King's Monument. Now he just had to wait a day or two. I wonder if I should build the Gardens of Babylon, like Dr. Regina Babylon and Alicia. He murmured to himself. Regina Babylon, a scientist or inventor from ancient times in Alicia, was the creator of the Gardens of Babylon, leaving them floating around the world. Aiden wasn't foolish. He had studied all the technology behind that marvel. Anyway, it's time to return. I'll finish this once I have at least one subordinate. With those words, Aiden returned from the dimensional gap. Draconic Dais. Earth. Kyoto. At the motel. 1 day later, Aiden stood before a servant of the Phoenix household, who maintained an impeccably professional posture. With a fluid movement, the servant handed him a sealed envelope containing a letter. Aiden-sama, you have been invited by Lord Phoenix. The ceremony will begin at 7 p.m. in the human world, and the location is detailed in the letter. The servant, who could have easily been a butler from any noble's mansion, gave a slight bow, placing his hand over his chest as a sign of respect. Aiden took the letter with a calm smile, leaning casually against the wall. I see. I'll be there. Thank you for the invitation. I didn't think I'd be invited to such an important event, being just a human. Of course, Aiden-sama. According to Riser-sama, you are a mage of great talent, and Ravel-sama has spoken highly of you and the technology you plan to develop with Lord Phoenix's support. The butler replied, his tone completely respectful, with not a trace of disdain despite Aiden's human nature. Aiden wondered if the servant was merely acting or if he had genuinely grown so accustomed to dealing with humans that he didn't even flinch. The Phoenix family had many servants, after all, and he was probably used to handling these situations with total indifference. Flash! After a final exchange of words, the butler disappeared in a flash, taking with him the teleportation magic circle marked with the Phoenix family crest. Aiden returned to the motel and entered the room where Origami, Kotori, Miku, and Nia were. The other girls, as always, were out somewhere in Kyoto or a similar location. Anyone want to join me for this boring engagement party? Aiden asked, holding up the invitation with an amused smile. They had told him he could bring several companions if he wished. Boring, Origami replied, showing no interest. Aiden-kun, I don't want to be a bother. Aren't you going to negotiate with the head of the house afterward? I don't want to get in the way of all that, Nia said with a hint of hesitation in her voice. If you don't want to go because you're too lazy, just say it already, all the girls in the room thought simultaneously. If you don't want to go, just say it, Kotori said mercilessly, looking at Aiden with a smile. I'll go anyway. I'm bored here. I don't feel like wandering around Kyoto either. After thinking it over a bit more, Nia couldn't resist and added herself to the group. Well, maybe I'll go too. I might get some inspiration from my manga. Imagine a guy opposing that marriage or something. At least it might give me some ideas. Nia finally decided to join after Kotori exposed her without hesitation. Okay, Aiden replied, shrugging with a smile. Miku declined, and the other girls who returned later also decided not to accompany him. Thus, only Aiden, Kotori, and Nia would attend the ceremony. End of chapter. A/N. Probably the protagonist will only be a bystander, because intervening there, without being an ally of the Phoenix yet, would be complete stupidity. Besides, in that wedding drama, there isn't even a villain. Issei is a fool whose only motivation is Rias. Riser, on the other hand, was in love with her. Yes, his attitude is nasty, but he's not evil. He's just doing his part in that marriage. Rias isn't entirely to blame either. Yes, she failed in her duty as an heiress by not marrying, and we could say she's a lousy heiress, but as a person? Well, she is understandable. In short, there is no villain in this story. If you have to look for a culprit, blame it on the parents or Surzex, who were the ones who organized this whole wedding. Chapter 28, Satan-class Siskon. Draconic Dais. Underworld. Territory of the Phoenix House. Inside a spacious hall, decorated with luxury and elegance, countless guests exchanged words. Most were pure-blooded devils who had received exclusive invitations, though among them were also some reincarnated devils, servants of their respective kings. Aiden, Nia, and Kotori were standing in a specific corner of the hall, observing the place with curiosity as this long-awaited marriage unfolded. There are too many pure-blooded devils here. Even Lucifer is over there, alongside the Gremory family. Kotori sent through mental communication to Aiden and Nia, crossing her arms with an impatient air. Her white dress stood out as much as her hair, which today was loose and long, falling to the small of her back, a drastic change from her usual pigtails. Well, of course, there'd be many pure-blooded devils. This marriage isn't something common. It's quite rare, Nia responded. She wore an elegant ash-colored dress, the same color as her hair, paired with a simple diamond necklace. An alliance between the Phoenix and the Gremory is a very important event for the underworld. Immortality combined with the destructive power of Rias Gremory. Makes sense. Maybe a super demon like Surzex Lucifer or a Juka Beelzebub will be born. One that can't be eliminated by normal means. Yes, it's a good strategic move. And not to mention the Phoenix Tears, Aiden added from his position next to them. Immortality and absurd firepower. Well, we already have something similar in our family, don't we? Nia glanced sideways at Coterie, who was still crossing her arms, glaring at the devils who dared to look at her for too long. The immortality of Camel doesn't compare to theirs. If Aiden's head were cut off and his brains separated from his body, that would be the end. But with Asmodeus, as long as you have Ryuryoku or magical power, you'll stay alive, Coterie replied impassively. I know, I was just saying, murmured Nia as she grabbed a glass of wine from the nearby table and took a sip. By the way, it's delicious, although it doesn't take away from how boring all this is. When will the key figures arrive? And, most importantly, when will the one opposing this marriage show up? Are you still on about that? You read too much manga, Nia. You should learn to distinguish between reality and fiction. This is the Phoenix House. There are guards everywhere, a Mao is here, and also a ton of powerful devils. How do you think anyone could infiltrate here? Aiden shook his head, clearly convinced nothing could interrupt the ceremony. The mere presence of Surzek's Lucifer would be enough to dissuade any intruder. What Aiden didn't know, of course, was that this Siscon had already prepared everything for the wedding to be interrupted. Why didn't he know? Well, why should he? He could have investigated using Raziel before coming, but he saw no point in worrying about every detail. After all, it wasn't as if he cared much about the ceremony. His time wasn't for such pastimes. Nia, on the other hand, had read that information. Not because she cared more, but because she had stumbled upon those details while researching the people involved, thanks to Raziel. We'll see. She merely laughed, clearly excited about the spectacle she believed was about to unfold. Besides, it might serve as inspiration for her manga, whose first chapter was soon to be published. Nia, don't tell me you investigated something with Raziel, Coterie asked, raising an eyebrow. And why would I do that? Aiden intervened, looking at her incredulously. Oh, come on, don't look at me like that, as if I were trash, Coterie chin. It was pure coincidence. While I was investigating the guests, that information just came up on its own. It's not my fault. Blame Raziel, not me, okay? Sure. Anyway, tell us what's going to happen. I'm bored, and some entertainment wouldn't hurt, Coterie said, giving her a slight nudge to encourage her to speak. Aiden watched the two of them as they conversed mentally and shook his head, letting out a sigh. Sometimes he felt they were too carefree, though he couldn't deny that their freedom was something he secretly admired. As his eyes scanned the hall, he noticed several pure-blood devils glaring at him with disdain. After all, he was a human. However, when their eyes fell on Coterie and Nia, their expressions turned confused. None of them knew what to make of the two, as they couldn't identify their race. After all, Coterie and Nia were spirits from a parallel world, created in a peculiar way. Even so, Aiden's company alone was enough for them to be scorned as well. Maintaining a neutral expression, Aiden observed the situation with indifference, though deep down, the arrogance of those devils irritated him. Without overthinking it, he released a faint killing intent directed at those who dared to look at Coterie and Nia with disdain. Shiver. As expected, upon feeling that dark pressure, the devils quickly turned their heads or forced nervous laughter, pretending to chat amongst themselves as if nothing had happened. Pathetic. That was the only thought that crossed Aiden's mind as he watched them. However, not everyone looked at him that way. Some devils showed curiosity, and the reincarnated devils seemed to hold a different opinion. After all, they were the only humans present at this ceremony. With a slight nod, Aiden acknowledged those who at least showed a modicum of courtesy before refocusing on his own matters. Hey, my other self, how's it going? Too complicated? You're in devil territory, and I'm sure there are a ton of guards around. He mentally transmitted through his angel, Zafkiel, to a time clone he had tasked with a mission. Time clones were an ability derived from the 8th bullet, Het, which allowed him to create versions of himself from different temporal points, from a few seconds ago to several minutes. These clones existed in a dimension created by his own shadow, manifested through the power of Zafkiel. There are a lot of barriers here. It's tricky to deactivate them without alerting anyone, but it shouldn't be a problem. By the time the wedding is over, I'll have finished here. I'm about to reach the king's monument, so don't worry, my original self, the clone replied. Aiden nodded, satisfied. He had sent the clone to the capital of the underworld, Lilith, to analyze the king's monument. And what about the risk of being discovered? Aiden wasn't too concerned. After all, the clone's appearance had been altered with Haniel, which could almost perfectly replicate the image of another person. In this case, he had chosen to impersonate the devil from whom he had obtained the evil pieces. The best part? That devil was already dead, so there was nothing to worry about. Are you telling me that Lucifer is a Siscon? Coterie exclaimed mentally, completely shocked. Nia couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. It was natural. Anyone who heard what she had just explained would have the same incredulous expression. But isn't this very unfair to the Phoenix House? Coterie asked, seeking Aiden and Nia's opinion. Aiden, after hearing everything Nia had explained, didn't quite know how to respond either. The question was valid. It is very unfair, indeed, he finally replied after thinking about it for a bit. This engagement between the Gremory House and the Phoenix House was made many years ago for important reasons, but it seems the Gremory regretted it, or simply love their family so much that they don't care about breaking the deal. The agreement had three fundamental pillars: the fusion of the immortal power of the Phoenix clan with the destructive power of the Bale Gremory, which would produce incredibly powerful descendants. A solid alliance between both houses, including the indirect support of the strongest Mao in the underworld. The preservation of pure-blood devils. This marriage between pure lineages could slow down the extinction of pure-blood devils, as most devils today were reincarnated thanks to the evil pieces. Reincarnated devils weren't necessarily weak. Many reached high-class status and, upon doing so, could form their own peerage with a set of evil pieces. But this meant that, eventually, the number of pure-blood devils would dwindle to just a few hundred. In the future, even the position of Mao might fall to someone who wasn't a pure-blood devil, something the egos of the council elders would never accept. Well, Aiden continued, summarizing his thoughts, it seems Rias Gremory didn't want to marry an idiot like Riser, or she simply wanted to choose her own partner. Either way, Surzek's Lucifer loves his sister so much that, despite having to be neutral and support this marriage for the sake of the underworld, he prioritized her instead. A failure as a Mao, but a great older brother, I suppose. Yeah, as an older brother, he did his duty and helped his little sister. But even so, it's still unfair to the Phoenix, Coterie added, clearly torn in her opinion. It's unfair, yes, but I don't think it's worse than having the strongest Mao chasing you for the rest of your life because his little sister is suffering in the marriage, Nia interjected, shaking her head. To her, Riser should simply forget this impossible love. Resisting meant facing Lucifer's wrath one day. First, there was a rating game between Rias Gremory's peerage and Riser Phoenix's to resolve the engagement. Rias lost, but Lucifer didn't give up and orchestrated everything for the Red Dragon Emperor to arrive as a knight in shining armor and rescue the maiden. If Riser were to win again, what would come next? A direct confrontation with the Mao? Honestly, it was better to find another woman than to get into so much trouble. And if anyone dared to question Surzex for his actions, well, who could do it? No one challenged the strongest devil. Opinions and rumors might arise, but for Lucifer, his sister was the most important thing. In the end, the Gremory had always been known as one of the most loving clans in the underworld. And clearly, it wasn't a myth. Satan-class Siscon, Coterie muttered in the end, with a touch of sarcasm. As they conversed mentally, Ravel approached to greet them. Aiden, Coterie, and Nia, seeing her so happy with that big smile, couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for her. How naive she looked, so excited about her older brother. Ugh, now I feel bad for this poor, cute girl, Nia commented in her thoughts. Why are her breasts so big? Coterie, although she agreed with Nia, couldn't help but slide in another observation. Wasn't Ravel supposed to be only 16 years old? The world is unfair, Coterie Chin, Nia replied, resigned. Ravel, always polite, slightly inclined her head before speaking. Aiden-sama, thank you for coming. This is a happy occasion for my older brother, so I thought of inviting you. I hope I didn't bother you. As courteous as ever, Ravel was adorable. Aiden couldn't resist wanting to pat her head. Are you really one of those pure-blooded devils? Don't worry, Ravel-chan. I also wanted to seal the deal as soon as possible. Thank you for the invitation. The word chan slipped out without thinking. After all, this girl was just too cute. Kotori, meanwhile, kept looking at Ravel's generous proportions with a mix of envy and resignation. Although she could adopt an adult form thanks to her power, her original body was still well flat. Nia, for her part, observed the interaction with interest. When Ravel blushed at Aiden's comment, she couldn't help but reflect. Isn't this girl too easy? Or has Aiden been seducing her for a while to make her react like that? After all, Aiden had nothing to envy about Surzex himself. "Si-chan?" Ravel exclaimed involuntarily, drawing all eyes in the hall. With her face completely red, she hid behind Aiden. "Aiden-sama, you shouldn't address a lady like that," she whispered, still irritated. "Ah, sorry. It's just that Ravel is so cute," Aiden said, clearly teasing her. "Aiden-san, you shouldn't make fun of me like that. Won't your companions get upset?" she replied, trying to regain composure while her blush subsided. "No, don't worry. It doesn't matter at all," Nia intervened with a terrifying smile, "because Aiden will never be able to get rid of us. If he tries, well, she left the threat implicit. He'll never get rid of us unless he wants to die," added Kotori, while small flames danced around her. Although, honestly, her eyes remained fixed with envy on Ravel's chest. Aiden felt a chill. Although he knew his companions wouldn't oppose as long as they approved of the person, those warnings were enough to freeze anyone. However, he had no intention of playing with fire. He was just having fun. Really?" said Ravel, but realizing her words, she blushed intensely again. "Ravel-chan is so cute," Aiden whispered in her ear, causing her to flee directly toward her parents and older brothers. "Do you like her?" Kotori asked, raising an eyebrow. Aiden sighed as he recalled Ravel's conversations and personality. "Saying I like her is too soon, but she's cute and kind. Besides, she's so happy for her older brother." The event continued. Rias Gremery, the redhead, stood at the altar with Riser Phoenix, ready for the ceremony. Aiden, Kotori, and Nia were chatting calmly until a loud noise at the entrance made them turn. Bang! A teenager in a school uniform burst into the hall after kicking the door, as if it were nothing. "Butchu," he shouted, drawing all eyes. "To all the high-class devils here, and to Bucho's brother, Mao-sama, my name is Hayato Issei from Kuo Academy. I've come to take Bucho, Rias Gremeries." The initial silence gave way to a deafening murmur. The hall filled with chaos, while Aiden observed Surzex Lucifer with an expression of disbelief. "You're a good older brother for saving your sister, but man, you're shameless," Aiden thought, sighing. End of the chapter. Even though many people dislike Issei for being a super pervert or simply because they don't like him, let me tell you that in this fanfic, he won't be humiliated or anything like that. He also won't have much importance since he's a secondary character, but he won't be disrespected just because the author dislikes him. In my case, I don't particularly hate him. Yes, he can be annoying at times, but in the light novel, even though he remains irritating, he's not that bad. Also, let's admit it, at least he's brave. He was able to step up when it mattered, sacrificing his left arm without hesitation to save Rias. Of course, that also makes some people call him a simp, but who cares? In any case, Issei won't be humiliated by me, so sorry if you were expecting something like that. Here are some pictures of Kotori, Nia, and Ravel I found online.